When I got the notice taped to my front door, I thought it was a joke. A brand new chain-link gate had gone up overnight right across the old path that led from my backyard to the beach. My beach. I stood there, coffee in one hand, jaw halfway to the sand, staring at the padlock like it had personally insulted me. The note read, "Access to the beach via Lot 17 is a violation of HOA coastal preservation policy. Gate installed accordingly. Sylvia Cartwright, HOA President, Sylvia." That name alone made my pulse spike. She was your classic middle-aged HOA tyrant, pale pink visor, clipboard surgically attached to her arm, and a voice that could slice drywall. I'd lived in Seabreeze Shores for 5 years, long enough to know she didn't give a damn about coastal preservation. What she cared about was control. If she couldn't walk her toy poodle past it, she wanted it gone. Thing is, Lot 17 wasn't part of the HOA. It was mine. Bought it fair and square with my house. The path had been used for decades by the original owner and grandfathered in via a private easement. It wasn't HOA land, but Sylvia never let facts get in the way of a power trip. I drove straight to the HOA office. Their headquarters was a converted guest house behind Sylvia's place, complete with fake marble columns and an American flag that hadn't been taken down since Memorial Day. I didn't even knock. I pushed open the door, and there she was, Sylvia Cartwright in all her pastel glory, tapping away at her iPad like she was managing the Pentagon. "You've got 2 minutes," I said. "Take the gate down." Sylvia didn't look up. "Mr. Stellan Rivers, your beach path is an eyesore and a liability. The HOA has full authority to restrict dangerous access points." "Except you don't," I said, walking up to her desk. "Lot 17 isn't HOA land, never has been." She finally looked up, eyes narrow. "We updated the community map last month. It's part of the common area now." I blinked. "You did what?" "We voted. It passed. Simple majority. You can't just vote to steal private property." She stood, brushing imaginary lint from her blouse. "Mr. Rivers, I suggest you review the CC and Articus, if you can read legalese, that is." I left before I did something I'd regret. Back home, I dug out the deed, the easement paperwork, everything. I made copies. I filed a complaint with the county and contacted my lawyer, but I knew Sylvia well enough to sense she wasn't going to back off. She believed she owned the whole damn neighborhood. The next morning, I found a citation on my windshield. "Unauthorized use of HOA property, fine, $500. Signed by Sylvia herself. That's when I decided I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to end this, so I started digging. Not in the sand, but in the records department at City Hall. After 2 days of research, I found something Sylvia had clearly never bothered to check. The HOA didn't own the private road leading into the neighborhood. It had been deeded to a defunct developers LLC that never transferred ownership to the HOA. And the LLC, it had gone bankrupt 7 years ago, and now it was for sale. Dirt cheap. I made the call, bought the road. Sylvia had gated off my beach access. I was about to lock her entire HOA out of their own neighborhood. By the following week, I owned the only road into Seabreeze Shores. The paperwork was finalized in a dull office with flickering fluorescent lights. Just me, a notary, and an attorney who looked far too amused by the whole thing. I transferred the deed into a holding company listed under my name and waited. Not out of kindness, out of strategy. I wanted Sylvia to make the next move. She didn't disappoint. 3 days later, I saw a crew in neon vests unloading a stack of lumber and orange cones near the entrance. I walked over, hands in my jacket pockets. The foreman looked up. "You the HOA guy?" "Not even close," he squinted. "We're putting in a kiosk and arm gate. HOA wants to restrict non-resident traffic. They've got a permit." I pulled a folded sheet from my back pocket and handed it to him. "What's this?" "Deed to the road you're standing on. It's private property. You're trespassing." He read it, looked back at his crew, then back at me. "We were told this was HOA maintained." "Yeah, that's what they want you to believe. But unless you've got written permission from the owner, which is me, you're going to have a legal problem." He handed the paper back. Understood, we'll pack up. He didn't say another word before climbing into his truck. That afternoon, I installed 2 metal posts at the entrance and chained them together. I added a sign. Private road, no unauthorized access. Owner, Stellan Rivers. The next morning, the HOA board held an emergency meeting. I didn't attend, but I watched from across the street, leaning against my truck with a cup of coffee as residents filtered in and out of Sylvia's garage like ants after a kicked nest. A few hours later, Sylvia came marching up my driveway, flanked by 2 of her board members, Ron, a retired insurance adjuster who still wore his badge on a lanyard, and Marcy, who spent most of her time handing out warnings about mailbox paint colors. Sylvia didn't bother with pleasantries. You're interfering with community operations. I'm protecting my property, I said. You've created a hostile situation. Residents can't get deliveries. Emergency vehicles are being delayed. Then maybe the HOA shouldn't have tried to build a gate on land it doesn't own. Ron stepped forward. We contacted the county. That road has always been part of the neighborhood. Not legally, I said. The original developer never transferred the title. The county records prove it. You can dig them up yourself. Marcy crossed her arms. You can't just hold the entire neighborhood hostage over a personal vendetta. I lowered my voice. I didn't start this. You built a gate on my land. You issued a fine for walking on my property. And now you're pretending to manage a road you don't own. If you keep pushing, I'll escalate. Sylvia's lips pressed into a line. This isn't over. I watched them walk away. That night, I installed cameras on each end of the road, motion-activated, infrared cloud-backed. I wasn't taking any chances. I knew Sylvia's brand of desperation. She wasn't used to being told no, especially not by someone who knew the law better than she did. The footage proved useful faster than I expected. The next morning, I reviewed the overnight recordings and spotted 2 men in dark clothing loosening the chain I'd locked across the road. They didn't break it, just removed it and set it aside. Then they rolled it back in place like nothing happened. By sunrise, a moving truck had come and gone. I downloaded the footage and called the sheriff's department. 2 deputies arrived within the hour. I met them at the end of the road with a flash drive and the original deed. Deputy Morales, the older of the 2, watched the video twice. You recognize either of them? Not personally. But I have a feeling the HOA knows exactly who they are. Deputy Langley flipped through the paperwork. This all checks out. Road's private, you've got the right to restrict access. So what happens now? I asked. Morales looked up. We'll open a case. Tampering with private property is a misdemeanor. If the HOA hired them, that's criminal conspiracy. We'll talk to the board. I nodded. You might want to visit their president, Sylvia Cartwright. She's not exactly subtle. Langley took photos of the chain and the gate, then asked if I'd be willing to testify. I said yes without hesitation. That night I got my first visitor. His name was Dennis. He lived 2 houses down and had mostly kept to himself since I moved in. He knocked around 9, holding a flashlight and a 6-pack of beer. I heard what you did, he said. With the road, news travels fast. He handed me a beer and leaned against the porch rail. You know they tried to fine me for having a flagpole in my yard, said it was a visual obstruction, my son's in the Navy. I didn't say anything. I let the silence speak for itself. Dennis nodded slowly. They've been running things like a little kingdom. You're the first person that's pushed back. I cracked the beer. I'm just getting started. By the end of the week, I wasn't alone. A retired contractor named Lyle offered to help reinforce the gate. A nurse named Tara handed me a folder of past HOA citations that didn't match county records. Even the mailman stopped to tell me that Sylvia had tried to make him reroute deliveries through a side entrance for aesthetics. I compiled everything. I wasn't just fighting for my property anymore, I was building a case. Then came the letter. Certified mail, envelope bearing the HOA seal. Inside was a cease and desist order claiming I was unlawfully obstructing a designated community access point. It threatened civil litigation and damages for loss of neighborhood functionality. I scanned it and sent it to my attorney, a woman named Janine who had a habit of taking HOA boards apart like expired VCRs. Her reply came within the hour. This letter is garbage. They have no claim. In fact, they've opened themselves to a countersuit. I called her. Janine, I said, how far can we push this? She didn't hesitate. Far enough to make them wish they'd never touched your fence. That weekend, I held a neighborhood meeting not sanctioned by the HOA. Just a gathering in my backyard with folding chairs and lemonade. Over 30 families came, some curious, some furious, all tired of Sylvia. I laid it out clean. I own the road. I've got legal proof. The HOA has overstepped repeatedly, but this isn't just about me. It's about all of us. If you've been fined for things that aren't in the bylaws or pressured or threatened, I want it documented. People stepped forward, quiet at first, then in waves. One woman had been told she couldn't park in her own driveway because her car was too old. A single dad had been fined for letting his kid's skateboard ramp sit on the lawn for more than a day. A couple had received a written warning for hosting a barbecue without prior culinary disclosure. Whatever that meant, we collected affidavits. We pulled the original HOA bylaws. We compared them to the altered ones Sylvia had pushed through last year under the pretense of streamlining. Turns out, she'd forged 3 board member signatures to pass amendments that gave her unilateral authority over fines and property access. Janine drafted a formal complaint to the State Housing Commission and attached copies of every altered document, every false citation, and the footage of the property tampering. On Monday, the sheriff came back, this time with a warrant. They walked straight past the decorative fountains and into Sylvia's house. She was arrested for falsifying legal documents and criminal mischief. Ron and Marcy were issued citations and banned from holding any administrative positions pending investigation. The HOA board was suspended by the county pending reorganization, and I took the chain off the road. I paved it, added lighting, repainted the curbs, then I installed a new sign, community access restored. Respect private property, welcome home. The beach path stayed open. So did every driveway, every flagpole, every skateboard ramp, and Sylvia, she never came back. The county's suspension of the HOA board sent waves through Seabreeze shores, but the real aftershocks didn't hit until Sylvia's arraignment. Janine called me the morning after it happened. They filed 3 felony charges, she said, her voice unusually grave. Forgery, unlawful seizure of private property, and obstruction of municipal infrastructure. I sat on the porch, the sun barely over the horizon, coffee cooling in my hand. Infrastructure? They found out she rerouted a drainage line last year without permits, buried it under Lot 15 to make room for her community garden. That pipe was supposed to run under the sidewalk and out to the marshland. Now it dumps directly into a neighbor's crawlspace. I stood up. That's going to be a problem if we get a storm. It already is, Janine said. The county's environmental office flagged it. They're sending an inspector this week. That same afternoon, an unmarked white van pulled up outside Sylvia's former headquarters. 2 men in shirts with county logos got out and started planting orange flags along the sidewalk. I walked over, keeping my distance. One of them glanced up. You the property owner? Nope, just the guy who owns the road, he chuckled. Well, it's a mess. That pipe's not just out of code, it's illegal. She had someone reroute it through private property and falsified the permit. We've got a backlog of complaints from residents, she told, to mind their own business. This whole place could have flooded in the next heavy rain. As they worked, I noticed a group of residents gathering across the street. They weren't gawking, they were watching purposefully. I recognized Lyle and Tara, plus a few new faces I hadn't spoken to yet. One of them, a woman in her 60s with a sun hat and a clipboard, walked up. I'm Elise, she said. I've lived here 22 years. You've been doing good work. Appreciate that, I said. We're organizing a new community council, she went on. No formal HOA, just volunteers. We want transparency. No more secret votes, no more fines for having the wrong kind of porch light. I raised an eyebrow. You're taking over the void Sylvia left, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. We're making sure no one like her fills it again. That night, I got a call from Deputy Morales. She's not getting out anytime soon, he said. Her bail was denied. Judge cited risk of further community harm. I leaned against the kitchen counter. I figured as much. There's more, he added. We found evidence she'd been siphoning HOA dues into a personal account, over $70,000 misappropriated over 3 years. I stood straight. She stole the dues, not just that. She used them to pay for landscaping at her daughter's house in another county, bought a golf cart, even hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on residents who challenged her. My breath caught in my throat. She was surveilling people. Looks like it. We've got receipts, invoices, even a signed contract, all admissible. I hung up and walked out back. The beach was still, the tide low. The gate she'd installed was long gone. I dismantled it myself with a crowbar and a pair of bolt cutters the day after her arrest. The next morning, I met Elise and the rest of her group in the community park. They'd brought folding tables, clipboards, and an old whiteboard with fading marker stains. All volunteers, no titles, no salaries. We're calling it the Seabreeze Neighborhood Forum, she said. We'll meet monthly, everything's public, no power structure, just votes. It's a start, I said. Better than what we had, said someone from the back. One of the new volunteers, a guy named Marcus, handed me a printed report. It's a summary of the HOA's budget for the last 5 years. We went through every line Sylvia filed. Half of it doesn't match the bank records. Janine reviewed it that night and filed a petition with the state to dissolve the HOA permanently. Not suspend, dissolve. If it passed, any leftover funds would be redistributed to the residents or used to repair the drainage system Sylvia had sabotaged. The vote came 3 weeks later. Held in the community park, county officials oversaw it. No proxy ballots, no last-minute amendments, just a simple count. Keep the HOA or shut it down. Out of 212 eligible households, 197 voted to dissolve. The county clerk posted the results on a laminated notice board near the entrance. It was over. But not for me. 2 days later, I got a letter from a law firm I didn't recognize. It was from the family of the original developer, the one whose LLC had gone bankrupt years ago, leaving the road unclaimed. They'd seen the news coverage, read the court filings, and wanted to meet. We scheduled it at a local cafe. A man in his 40s with silver-rimmed glasses sat across from me. My grandfather built Seabreeze Shores, he said. He died before the LLC could finish dissolving. The road was supposed to be gifted to the county, but the paperwork was never filed. So it stayed in limbo, I said. Exactly. We saw you rescued it from being misused. We want to offer something. I waited. You've stabilized the community. You've got the respect of the residents. We're offering to deed the remaining infrastructure to your company, legally, fully. I raised an eyebrow. You want me to own the sidewalks and medians too? Everything that was meant to be public but fell through the cracks. I didn't answer right away. That night I walked the length of the road. Kids were out riding bikes. A couple grilled in their driveway. No one was yelling about paint colors or measuring grass height. For the first time, Seabreeze Shores actually felt like a neighborhood. I called Elise the next morning. I'm thinking about accepting the offer, I told her, but not to control anything. Just to make sure no one else tries what Sylvia did. She didn't hesitate. Do it. I signed the paperwork that week. My holding company now owned the road, the sidewalks, the medians, and every inch of common space the HOA used to pretend was theirs. Then I set up a public easement agreement. Legally binding, recorded with the county. It guaranteed permanent, unrestricted access for all residents. No future entity could gate it, sell it, or fine anyone for using it. After that, I dissolved the holding company and transferred ownership to a community trust controlled by a rotating board of residents unpaid, term limited, and publicly elected. Lyle took the first rotation. Tara the second. The community trust held its first open session under the park pavilion, with lemonade and folding chairs, just like the meeting we held weeks ago. The beach path stayed open. The gate never went back up, and the road, it stayed ours. It started with a subpoena. I found it tucked between a stack of mail, wedged behind an ad for gutter cleaning and a newsletter from the community trust. It was from the district attorney's office, addressed to me personally. Not unexpected, but the timing was curious. It had been almost 2 months since the HOA's formal dissolution and Sylvia's arrest. The subpoena requested my presence at a grand jury hearing scheduled for the following week. I called Janine immediately. "They're expanding the case," she said. Turns out Sylvia wasn't working alone. I waited for her to continue. The county's forensic accounting team recovered financial trails leading to 2 former contractors and a real estate broker who were laundering HOA funds through shell companies. They're suspected of inflating invoices for fake property maintenance, tree trimming, storm drain cleaning, even pest control, and splitting the difference with Sylvia. My stomach turned. Let me guess, the board signed off without verifying anything. Worse, Janine said. Some of the signatures were forged, others were coerced. One of the former board members came forward. She's cooperating in exchange for immunity. When I walked into the county courthouse the next week, I didn't expect the sheer scale of what had been uncovered. The assistant DA showed me a flowchart that looked like it belonged in an organized crime documentary. Layered LLCs, fake subcontractors, and kickbacks disguised as community enrichment stipends. More than $200,000 had been siphoned from resident dues over a 5-year period. "You were the first domino," the assistant DA said. "Your complaint about the beach access triggered the audit. Frankly, I don't think they ever expected anyone to dig past the surface." I testified for over 2 hours. They asked about the road purchase, the fraudulent fine, the gate installation, and every interaction I'd had with the HOA board. I gave them everything: dates, names, copies of the footage, even a voice memo I'd recorded during the first confrontation with Sylvia. By the time I left the courthouse, the sun was starting to fall behind the clouds, and my phone was buzzing with messages from neighbors. Word had spread that the grand jury had returned indictments, 7 in total. That weekend, I was invited to a gathering at Elise's. Not an official meeting, just a casual potluck. Her backyard overlooked the marshland, and she'd strung up solar lights along the fence. About 30 people showed, bringing folding chairs and homemade dishes. I brought a tray of roasted vegetables and a 6-pack of root beer. Marcus was already there, flipping through a folder of documents. "I've been digging into that real estate broker," he said as I joined him near the fire pit. He was trying to quietly buy up homes at reduced prices from residents who'd been fined into financial stress. Sylvia would flag their properties as non-compliant for made-up violations, then he'd swoop in with an offer before they could fight it. "That's predatory," I said. "It's criminal." The DA's office is adding real estate fraud to the charges. Elise joined us, holding a mason jar filled with something bright green and fizzy. "We've already contacted the affected homeowners," she said. "A few are joining a civil suit. They're going after restitution. And the trust is funding their legal fees," Marcus added. Unanimous vote. Later that night, as the fire turned to embers and conversations quieted to murmurs, I sat beside Tara on the back steps. "They thought no one would notice," she said. "That they could keep tightening the screws until people either left or fell in line. They underestimated how fed up we were," I said. She looked out into the dark, where the marsh met the horizon. "I think they underestimated you." The indictments led to arrests within the week. 2 former contractors were picked up in another county, hiding out in a short-term rental under fake names. The broker tried to flee the state, but was intercepted at the airport. The news hit every local outlet, And for the first time, Seabreeze Shores wasn't just a neighborhood, it was the symbol of a community that fought back and won. I thought that would be the end of it. Then the county commissioner called. She asked to meet at the community park, no entourage, no cameras, just the two of us. When I arrived, she was sitting at the picnic table nearest the trailhead, a file folder beside her. "I wanted to thank you in person," she said. "Your actions exposed a network that's affected more than just your neighborhood. We're auditing 5 other HOAs based on leads connected to this case." I nodded, unsure where she was going. She opened the folder. "We'd like to formally designate the beach path as a protected community easement. County maintained. That way no future group HOA or otherwise can obstruct it without legal consequences." "And the land stays private?" I asked. "Yes, but access is guaranteed. It's a rare arrangement, but given the circumstances, we're making an exception." I took the paperwork home that night. Reviewed every clause. I had Janine look it over too. It was airtight. I signed it the next morning. The path would stay open. Forever. In the months that followed, Seabreeze Shores changed in ways that felt subtle but seismic. The community trust replaced HOA bureaucracy with public service. Volunteer committees handled landscaping, storm prep, and seasonal events. No one got fined for a garden gnome or a mismatched porch chair. The road underwent repaving, funded partly through a county grant and partly by donations. Children rode scooters without dodging potholes. Elderly residents walked without tripping over cracked concrete, and the beach it became the heart of the neighborhood again. We held our first summer bonfire in July, no permits, no warnings. Just a fire ring dug into the sand, marshmallows on sticks, and an old Bluetooth speaker playing a mix of classics and local favorites. Dennis stood up after the sun dipped below the tide line. He raised a can of ginger ale and looked around at the crowd. "To the guy who bought the road," he said. Everyone laughed, raised their drinks, and echoed the sentiment. "To the guy who bought the road." I didn't say anything, just nodded and took it in. Later, as I walked back along the path, feet sinking into cooled sand, I passed the spot where the gate had once stood. Nothing remained. Not even the post holes. Just dune grass and the whisper of waves. The community didn't just recover, it evolved. People who had once kept to themselves now shared tools, organized cleanups, and held impromptu porch concerts. We had no president, no bylaws, no fines, just a common understanding. Respect the space, respect each other, speak up when something's wrong. The grand jury indictments eventually led to convictions. Sylvia was sentenced to 4 years with another 6 on probation. The others received varying sentences depending on their involvement. Restitution was ordered across the board. Some residents who had been forced out returned, having repurchased their homes with the help of community fundraising. One evening, Elise handed me a wooden plaque at a trust meeting. It wasn't official, and it wasn't fancy. Just hand-carved letters and a simple message. Guardians of the Shoreline Stellan Rivers, 2024. I didn't hang it. I placed it on the bench near the trailhead under the old pine tree. Let it be a reminder not of what I did, but of what we refused to let happen again. And for the first time in years, Seabreeze Shores lived up to its name. No fences, no fear, just the sound of waves, the scent of salt in the air, and the quiet satisfaction of a community that had reclaimed itself one step, one document, one locked gate at a time.